All right, so you ready to really get into the Enneagram?
I am.
Okay, good. Because today we're going deep, like deep, deep,
No exciting, right?
into the world of the sexual type 6.
But counterphobic 6.
Yeah. Now, to illustrate this fascinating and often very paradoxical type, we thought we'd use a character you probably know pretty well.
Yeah.
Maximus Decimus Meridius from the movie Gladiator.
What a great example.
Right. And you might be thinking, wait a minute, Maximus, fearless general, warrior. That guy, he's driven by fear.
Right, you think 8, right. Strength, powerful.
Exactly.
But that's where it gets interesting, right?
Yes, that's what we're going to unpack today.
Yeah.
How someone who seems outwardly so fearless can be deeply motivated by a need for security.
Because with the counterphobic 6, it's not about the absence of fear.
It's about what?
It's about confronting it head on, sometimes even aggressively as a way to manage it.
So it's like instead of backing away from danger, they charge right at it.
Precisely. It's a preemptive strike against their own anxieties,
Wow.
a way of seizing control in situations that make them feel deeply insecure.
Okay, and I mean, this makes sense, right? This is a pretty common human response, I think, to any kind of trauma or loss, right?
Yeah.
I mean, look at Maximus. His family is murdered. His world is shattered.
She loses everything.
Yeah, and he doesn't just crumble.
No.
He becomes this force of nature, this unstoppable warrior seeking revenge.
Yeah.
So it seems like that quest for revenge, it's so much more than just anger, right? It's about reasserting control in a situation where he feels totally powerless.
Right.
By taking action, by fighting back, he's trying to create a sense of security in a world that suddenly feels so incredibly dangerous and unpredictable.
Exactly.
Yeah, it makes sense. But one of the things that strikes me about Maximus is that it's not just brute force.
Right. It's not just pure aggression.
No. He's also incredibly strategic. He's constantly assessing threats, planning his moves, even when he's surrounded by, supposed allies.
Yeah.
It's almost like he can't afford to let his guard down, ever.
That's classic 6. That hypervigilance, that need to be one step ahead. It stems from a deep-seated belief that the world is a dangerous place and that they need to be prepared for anything.
Oh, wow. So, remember those scenes in the film where he's kind of sizing up everybody,
Yes.
even his fellow gladiators?
Yes.
Is he being paranoid?
No, he's not being paranoid. He's being calculated.
Wow. And I think that's really intriguing because, on the one hand, that vigilance can be a real strength.
It is.
It means that you are incredibly perceptive. You can spot danger before anyone else. But it can also be probably very exhausting.
Oh, totally.
Living with that level of alertness all the time.
Imagine being on all the time. Yeah.
Yeah.
A double-edged sword. The same qualities that make them effective protectors and strategists can also keep them trapped in a cycle of fear and anxiety.
I see that.
Yeah.
So this leads us to another kind of fascinating aspect of the 6, which is this paradox of appearing strong while harboring deep vulnerability.
Yes.
It's like they're wearing this armor of toughness, but underneath, there's a tenderness, a sensitivity that they very carefully guard.
Yeah. And you see that so clearly with Maximus. Think about the moments when he allows himself to grieve for his family.
Yeah, to remember them.
To remember their love, the laughter. It's such a contrast to the warrior we see in the arena. It's a reminder that strength and vulnerability are not mutually exclusive.
No, not at all.
They can, and often do, coexist within us, especially in those who faced, immense challenges and hardship.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think that duality really makes you think about all those people we encounter in our own lives who project that kind of strength.
Yeah.
Right. Are they masking a deep well of vulnerability beneath the surface?
Absolutely.
It's interesting. It certainly adds another layer of complexity to understanding human behavior.
It does. It does.
Wouldn't you say?
Yeah, yeah. And it highlights an element of the 6 that we haven't even touched on yet.
Oh.
Loyalty.
Oh, yeah.
It's a defining characteristic of this type.
Right.
And it plays a huge role in Maximus's story.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, his loyalty to Marcus Aurelius, even after his death, it's unwavering.
It's unwavering, yeah.
But it's not like blind loyalty.
No.
There's a wariness, a skepticism that makes him constantly question the motives of those around him.
Exactly, because for the 6, loyalty is about more than just allegiance. It's about finding a secure base, a source of stability in a world that feels unpredictable and treacherous.
Makes sense.
And that means being very careful about who they trust.
Yeah, and it makes me think about those parts of the film where Maximus starts to form these incredible bonds with his fellow gladiators.
Right, he's got that camaraderie.
Yeah, there's that deep sense of shared struggle and purpose.
Yeah.
But even within that, there's a little bit of a cautiousness.
Yeah, he's still holding back a little bit.
Holding back, yeah.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder, what qualities make someone truly worthy of that kind of loyalty,
Right.
that level of trust?
Exactly. It speaks to our own need for connection, our need for belonging, and the challenges we face in finding those people who make us feel safe enough to, let down our guard. For the sex, it's a constant balancing act between their deep desire for connection and their equally strong fear of betrayal.
But let's be honest, there's another big part of Maximus's character that we can't ignore.
Oh, yeah.
And that's the aggression. I mean, he's a warrior. He's a gladiator.
Yeah.
Violence is a part of his world.
It's his life.
Yeah. But it seems different from the kind of aggression we see in someone like Commodus, who's clearly driven by just pure, lust for power.
That's right. That's a crucial distinction to make. The aggression of the sex is reactive, not proactive. It's a defense mechanism, a way of protecting themselves from perceived threats or injustice. Think about those fight scenes in the film.
Oh, so good.
Maximus isn't looking for a fight. He's forced into it.
Right.
And he fights back with such ferocity because his survival and ultimately the restoration of justice depends on it.
It's about protecting himself, right? Not about seeking power.
Exactly. It's a way of establishing boundaries, It's like saying, I won't be bullied. I won't be taken advantage of. And in a world like ancient Rome where power and brutality were just rampant, that kind of reactive aggression was often necessary for survival. But it also highlights a common misconception about aggression in general. It's not always about domination.
Right.
Sometimes it's a desperate attempt to protect oneself, to regain a sense of control in a situation that feels threatening.
And I think a lot of us can relate to that. Maybe not on the scale of gladiatorial combat, but think about those times when you snapped at someone or just felt that surge of anger when you felt cornered or unfairly treated.
Totally.
That's that reactive energy at play.
Right.
It's a natural human response, but for the six, it's often amplified because of that underlying fear of being vulnerable, of being caught off guard.
Exactly. And that brings us to another interesting element of this type that often seems at odds with their fear: the need for proof. Maximus, he repeatedly puts himself in dangerous situations. He seems to almost seek out these challenges.
Yeah, it seems counterintuitive.
Yeah. Why would someone so driven by a need for security constantly risk their own safety?
Yeah. What do you think is going on there?
Well, I think for the Celadon Police, challenges are a way to validate their fears. By overcoming obstacles, by proving that they can handle whatever life throws at them, they're seeking to silence those inner voices that whisper, you're not strong enough, you're not capable, you're gonna fail.
Ah, so each victory is like a small win against their own self-doubt.
Exactly.
And when you think about it that way, it makes sense why Maximus would be drawn to the arena, to those, life or death battles.
Yeah.
It's not just about revenge.
Yeah.
It's about proving to himself, and maybe to the world, that he can survive, that he's worthy, that he's not going to be broken by the tragedies he's endured.
That's right.
It's interesting, huh?
It's a fascinating dynamic.
Yeah.
It raises so many questions about our own relationship with challenges, right? When do we seek them out and when do we avoid them?
Right, and what are we hoping to prove to ourselves and others when we do?
Exactly.
So that need to prove oneself, to face those challenges head on, makes me think about Maximus's path to growth.
Yeah.
I mean, does he actually find that validation? Or does that, tragic end leave him kind of stuck in that cycle of fear and self-doubt?
Oh, it's such a poignant question, especially considering how his story ends.
Yeah.
But I think even in his tragically shortened journey, we see these glimpses of growth.
Okay.
Those moments where he begins to shift from that fear-driven strength to a deeper, more authentic courage. Remember, that journey is often a lifelong process filled with, setbacks and breakthroughs. It's not about eradicating fear entirely. It's about learning to move through it, to find that place of grounded strength that comes from self-acceptance.
So if Maximus's journey is about moving from fear to courage, what are some of those key moments that highlight that shift for you? What scenes really stand out?
One that always gets me is that quiet scene where he's tending to his wounds after a particularly brutal fight in the arena.
Oh, yeah.
He's alone, stripped of his armor, both literally and figuratively.
Right?
You see his physical pain, of course, but it's the emotional vulnerability that really resonates. For a moment, he lets go of that stoic warrior facade, and we see the raw weight of everything he's carrying. The grief for his family, the burden of his mission, the uncertainty of his future. There's no posturing, no bravado, just a man grappling with his pain.
Yeah, it's powerful, right?
It is.
And in that vulnerability, we see his humanity.
Yes.
And it makes his strength even more impressive because
Mhm.
it's not just about the, physical prowess or strategic brilliance. It's about that courage to face those deep, raw emotions and keep going.
Exactly. And that's a huge step for the six.
Right.
Remember, they often equate vulnerability with danger. So allowing themselves to feel those emotions, to acknowledge their pain and fear without trying to, push it down or conquer it, that's a profound act of courage in itself.
Because it means letting go of control, right?
Precisely. It's about developing a different kind of strength, one that's rooted in self-awareness and acceptance. And for Maximus, we see that starting to emerge in his interactions with Juba, the gladiator who becomes his confidant and friend.
Their relationship is so beautiful.
It is.
You can feel that sense of trust and genuine connection building between them.
Absolutely. And notice how Maximus starts to open up to Juba in a way he doesn't with anyone else.
Yeah.
He shares his grief for his family, his doubts about the gods, his hopes for a world where his son's memory can live on. These are deeply personal, vulnerable things to share, especially in that harsh, unforgiving world.
It makes their bond even more powerful, I think, because it's not just based on shared hardship or like a common enemy. It's built on a foundation of empathy and understanding.
And that's crucial for the six. They need to feel safe enough to let down their guard, to experience that kind of genuine connection where they can explore their own vulnerabilities without fear of judgment or rejection.
It makes me think about, how important it is for all of us to find those safe spaces in our own lives.
Yeah.
Whether it's with a partner, a close friend, a therapist, even a supportive online community. Having those people who see us, accept us, and hold space for our, messy, complicated selves is such a gift.
It is. It is. And it's not just about receiving support. It's also about learning to offer it to others.
Mm.
Because when we create those spaces of trust and vulnerability, we allow for deeper connection and ultimately greater healing and growth.
But it's not easy to let go of those defenses, is it?
No.
Especially for someone like Maximus, who's lived in a world where strength and self-reliance are, paramount.
Totally.
It's like those walls that he's built up have protected him for so long. It's like terrifying to even consider dismantling them.
It's incredibly challenging, and for the six, that fear of letting go is often rooted in past experiences of betrayal, abandonment, or feeling inadequate. So it makes perfect sense that they'd be hesitant to, open themselves up to that kind of vulnerability again.
So how do they do it? How can someone who's spent their life building those walls of protection begin to dismantle them? What does that process even look like?
Well, it often starts with small steps, small acts of courage. Choosing to trust someone with a small secret, sharing a vulnerability, asking for help when they need it. And each time they do that without being met with, rejection or harm, it reinforces the idea that maybe, just maybe, it's okay to let go a little bit.
It's like building trust in themselves,
Yes.
in their ability to navigate vulnerability without being completely shattered by it.
Yeah, exactly. And those small wins can have a ripple effect. As they experience the positive consequences of opening up, they become more willing to do it again, to take bigger risks, to allow for deeper connection. And for Maximus, we see those glimmers of possibility throughout the film, those moments where he chooses connection over isolation, vulnerability over defensiveness.
Like when he chooses to fight alongside his fellow gladiators,
Yes.
not just for his own survival, but for their freedom.
It's a pivotal moment, isn't it? Because it demonstrates a shift in his motivation. He's no longer solely focused on self-preservation. He's fighting for something bigger than himself, something that requires him to trust others, to rely on their support. And that act of trust, that willingness to put himself on the line for a greater good, that's true courage.
It's not the absence of fear.
Right.
It's the choice to act in spite of it.
Yes.
It's recognizing that true strength lies not in isolation, but in connection.
Beautifully said. And that's what makes Maximus's journey so inspiring, even though it's tragically cut short. He shows us that even in the face of immense adversity, we can choose to grow, to connect, to embrace our vulnerability as a source of strength.
It's a powerful message. But it also leaves us with a big question. How do we apply this to our own lives? What can we learn from Maximus's story about facing our own fears and embracing our own vulnerabilities?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? and one we'll delve into in the final part of our deep dive.
Okay, so welcome back to our deep dive into the world of the sexual type 6. I don't know about you, but I'm really feeling the weight of Maximus's journey.
Yeah.
And how much it reflects our own struggles with fear and courage. We've uncovered so much about this Enneagram type, their counterphobic tendencies, the need for control, that incredible loyalty mixed with a healthy dose of skepticism and the constant quest for proof.
Right. And we've seen how all of those qualities play out in Maximus's story, especially that struggle to move from like fear-driven strength to a deeper, more authentic courage. And it's a journey that I think resonates with so many of us, regardless of our Enneagram type.
I think so too. Absolutely. And so that brings us back to that big question that you posed at the end of part 2.
Yeah.
How do we actually apply these insights to our own lives? What can we learn from Maximus's story about facing our own fears, embracing our vulnerabilities?
It all comes back to those arenas that we talked about.
Right.
The places in our lives where we're being called to step up, to show up with courage, to push past those comfort zones and trust in something larger than ourselves. And what I find so fascinating is that those arenas aren't always these big, dramatic, life or death scenarios like the one that Maximus faces.
You're so right. It's not always about gladiatorial combat or
Right.
overthrowing evil emperors.
Right.
Sometimes the arena is a difficult conversation we need to have,
Absolutely.
or a creative risk we're afraid to take,
Yeah.
or even just admitting that we need help and asking for it.
Yes, exactly. And in those moments when we feel that like familiar surge of fear or that urge to retreat back into our comfort zones, we can draw inspiration from Maximus. He reminds us that courage is not about being fearless, right? It's about acting in spite of our fears. It's about choosing to move forward, even when our knees are shaking and our hearts are pounding.
And sometimes the most courageous act is simply choosing to be vulnerable,
Right.
to let go of control, to trust in something or someone outside of ourselves,
Yeah.
whether that's a friend, a loved one, a higher power, or even just the unpredictable flow of life.
I love that. Think back to how Maximus found strength in his connection with his fellow gladiators.
Yeah.
He realized that he didn't have to face those challenges alone, and neither do we. Finding our own tribe, those people who support us, challenge us, and hold space for our vulnerability can make all the difference.
Yeah, it's like building that sense of belonging, that shared humanity that reminds us that we're not alone in our struggles. And it makes me think about one of the, I think, biggest takeaways from our deep dive into the 6, which is that vulnerability, while often perceived as a weakness, can actually be the key to deeper strength
Yeah.
and more genuine connection.
It's about recognizing that we don't have to be perfect, we don't have to have all the answers, and we don't have to do it all alone. It's okay to ask for help, to lean on others, to admit when we're scared or uncertain. In fact, those moments of vulnerability can often be the catalyst for the most profound growth.
Just like Maximus, who, despite his tragic end, ultimately shows us that even in the face of immense adversity, we have the power to choose connection over isolation, vulnerability over defensiveness, and love over fear.
I love that. His story is a powerful reminder that we all have that inner warrior, a source of resilience, strength that we can tap into when we need it most. It's about finding those arenas in our own lives, facing our fears head on, and trusting that we have the courage to not only survive, but to truly thrive.
Well, on that inspiring note, I think it's time for us to step out of the arena for now, but keep exploring those questions we've raised today. What are your arenas? Where are you being called to step into your own courage?
Remember, that journey of growth and self-discovery, it's ongoing.
Yeah.
Keep questioning, keep connecting, and keep embracing the power of your own unique story.
We'll be back soon with another deep dive into the complexities of human personality. Until then, thanks for joining us.